Hi, y'all.
Hi, y'all.
Welcome to the very first episode of Sweet Tea brought to you by two Southern feminists. Since it is our first episode, we're going to have to do a few introductory remarks. Let's explain, first of all, the name of the show a little bit, if it's not obvious. Um, we are two feminist women living in the South. We like our tea sweet, but also, a play on the idea of the tea, as in the truth. Uh, we are going to try to bring you news and information and discussions that you might not hear everywhere else. Or we will always speak the truth, and we're going to try to bring a lot of topics and events that aren't getting the normal media coverage. We will try to focus on the southern US, southern USA, but we're also going to be talking about some other things happening around the USA. We just felt like there needed to be a focus on what's going on in our little neck of the woods, because a lot of the radical feminist conversations are very UK focused, which is like, God bless Turf Island. We love it. We love to know what's going on, but we wanted to see some more voices, some more discussion of what's going on in the USA. And we happen to be in the South. And so we thought this is how we could contribute to the discussions.
Right. So we want to just talk about some issues that are important to radical feminists in general, but specifically, we're going to try to talk more about what's going on in America and in the southern U.S. Specifically, this is a Southern women's perspective. Who we are, we're just two normal, unextraordinary women. We're not lawyers, social workers, psychiatrists, politicians, none of that. We're just like your favorite neighbor, somebody who you would want to stop by and sit on the porch with and have a glass of sweet tea. And we're the same kind of women that you would see in your school, your church, your job, supermarket, wherever. We're just regular women living and working in the South US. And we didn't want any women thinking that, well, because I'm not an expert, I can't talk about this, because we really do need normal women just talking about this. We need to hear all women's voices at this point. And so this is just going to be a place where women are welcome to talk about what's going on in their lives. And we're going to try to bring you what's going on in reference to feminism.
If you can't tell, folks, we're kind of nervous because it is our first episode. So I definitely just want to acknowledge that there are sometimes some awkward pauses, and maybe we sound a little bit like, I don't know, like it's happening now. Like I sound really awkward now. But really, the idea is we wanted to feel like you're just stopping by a friend's porch for a glass of sweet tea to have a chat, and this is a place where everybody's just honest and just tells it like it is. Um, and also, we don't want it to, we are going to talk about issues that are political in the sense of that are affecting our lives as American citizens and that are about public policy and things of that nature. But part of our struggle as Southern women feminists is we're not finding a strong political affiliation these days. We are seeing threats from the left and the right against women's rights. And so if you're a woman out there who feels like, yeah, I just don't even know what party would even listen to me anymore, we are in the same boat with you.
Politically
Maybe,
homeless.
yeah, politically homeless. Like maybe you grew up conservative, maybe you still identify as conservative, but you look and you see all of these really, really restrictive abortion laws, and you think, no, I just can't agree with that. I'm conservative on a lot of other issues, but I'm pro-choice. Or maybe you are a good Southern Democrat. That's what we are, but we look and we see a lot of gender identity ideology, and it's infringement on women's rights and women's safety. And we say, no, we can't just go along with the party line anymore. So if you feel politically homeless, we hope you feel like you have a space here. And also, we want you to know you might not agree with every single thing we say. And like, that's okay. We were just talking yesterday, weren't we, that the first time you said the first time you remember meeting me, it was because you disagreed with something that I said. But
Right.
you were like,
Yes.
oh, I want to keep talking to this person. I want to keep hearing what she has to say. And then we just went from there, got to know each other pretty well. And yeah, so we don't toe the party line of either party here, and we don't expect you to agree with everything. We're just trying to tell you what's going on these days.
Right. And so I think for me personally, it was something that really bothered me on the left was this erasure of the word woman. And I'm not personally anti anyone, but what I don't enjoy is being told that I can't refer to myself as a woman with my ovaries and cervix and all of that. Like, I mean, it's I don't know, the divide right now between left and right is, it is what it is. But here in the US, it seems harder and harder to even talk about these things. We can't even bring these things up, and it's getting pretty problematic because we need to be able to speak up for ourselves. I mean, we can't even organize as women, and we can't even talk about women's rights anymore because that's not politically correct. And I think that is a problem. I know it's a problem for me, and I'm sure it's a problem for a lot of other women. Like, we're not going to get anywhere if we can't even identify that we are women. We have to be able to define ourselves, and we can't define ourselves anymore. And we see it all the time in newspapers, saying that menstruators or people with a cervix or things like that. And it's humiliating. It's really dehumanizing when they use language like that, and it's not okay. And so personally, I just want to encourage other women to say, hey, you know what, I'm not okay with being called a menstruator. I'm not okay with being dehumanized like this. I am a woman. I have lived experiences as a woman, and I support women's rights. And that is okay to support women's rights.
I know the first place I ever encountered like the weird uses of language, I don't know if I encountered them earlier and just didn't pick up on it. But the first place they really like registered with me is one of the now famous JK Rowling tweets. Is she tweeted making fun of, like, an article had used the phrase people who menstruate, and she tweeted a joke about it, about like, we used to have a word for that. What is it? Wim palmed, and she's making up all these fake words. And I had no context for that tweet. I didn't know anything about what JK Rowling had been talking about. I was just like beautifully naive, but I thought that was a really funny joke because I thought, yeah, why wouldn't you just use the one word? Like, we have a word, women. Like, it's silly to use the phrase people who menstruate. It just sounds like jargony. And I thought it was a really funny joke that she made. And then, people just bashed her. And it didn't make any sense to me why suddenly there are all these articles about how evil she was based on, at the time, this is even like before the essay came out, based on the time, it was like 2 or 3 little tweets that just said very basic, forthright things. This one thing was kind of a little joke. And seeing the tidal wave of anger against her just wanting to use the word women That was the first place that I ever saw it. Do you remember the first place you ever saw it?
I think so. I saw it in some subreddits. And what bothered me is specifically these subreddits were for women's health issues. And that really just pissed me off. I could not get down with that. It, there was a couple of women that were talking about very specific endometriosis issues,
Mm-hmm.
and they were getting vilified in the comments. It was like, please don't use this term. Please don't use this term. And it was all terms that you would use when you're talking to other women who have shared experiences with endometriosis.
Mm-hmm.
And it bothered me. And then there was, there was a lot of lockdown on the subs for a while. I think it was PCOS sub was shut down. I believe the endometriosis one was shut down as well briefly. And it was just all of this arguing in these subreddits about what to call ourselves. And it bothered me because it's like, this was one of the first places that I felt like, oh, another woman relates to what I'm going through. And it was nice, like
Mm-hmm.
these health issues they're not fun. They're pretty shitty. And so like you feel really alienated. And I don't know. I really enjoyed seeing, other women post memes or, whatever, just to kind of cheer us up and let us know that we're not alone. And so to see that kind of policing of language when it was so inappropriate it just really bothered me. And then soon after that, I think was when the JK Rowling thing happened, and that really opened my eyes.
Mm.
And then when she released the essay as well, I read the essay and I was blown away. I was crying. I felt like, oh, this woman has such a beautiful and difficult story to tell. And she's telling it and she's being brave about this stuff. Like, this is not stuff that people want to talk about. And she's doing it. She's calling out, the domestic violence that she went through and very specific female things that she had gone through. And what happened to her? She was shut down. I mean, they just attacked her on Twitter like every single day, just calling her out for being transphobic. And it was like, did you read the articles? She sounds like a very sympathetic person who is a woman and who is talking about her very female experiences
Mm-hmm.
as a woman. Like, how can you knock that? Like, that's bullshit. So yeah, so I think the JK Rowling thing was a big issue for me, and it really opened my eyes as to what happened, because it was kind of happening around the time of like all these subreddits getting taken down. And yeah, I'm gonna be forever grateful for that woman for speaking her truth, because it was a really well written essay, and I encourage everybody to read
Everybody.
it.
Yeah, if you haven't read it by now. So I actually intentionally did not read the essay right away because when the tweet thing was happening, I was just like, oh, this is a funny joke. And she's tweeting this other stuff, and this is reasonable. And people who are mad about it, this is all just clickbait. This is all just like BuzzFeed articles, Pink News articles. This is clickbait. And nobody's, it's not going to go anywhere, just like any kind of like celebrity gossip clickbait. I really, because I didn't know what was going on under the surface. Like, I didn't know, for example, her big initial tweet was in support of Maya Forstater, and I didn't even know who that was. So I didn't know there was like stuff going on uh until I started thinking about it about a year ago. And I did a ton of research and reading and listening to interviews and listening to LGBT voices, listening to lesbians,
Mm-hmm.
listening to transitioned people themselves, listening to feminists, listening to parents, and reading not just blogs and online articles, reading actual books. And I wanted to make sure that I really understood all the issues myself before I read her essay, because I didn't want to feel like, oh, well, this celebrity said it, and I'm going to agree with this celebrity. I think it's great if a celebrity like JK Rowling or like Dave Chappelle last week, you know, gets people to look into it. I think it's great if they get people to kind of stop and think, what's this about? But then I definitely encourage people to keep looking into it themselves. And I started with a very simple question that I had a year ago, which was, what do people mean when they say that a man feels like a woman and needs to transition to living as a woman and claims that he's really a woman because he feels like a woman inside? I thought, what can that possibly mean to feel like a woman? Because I'm a woman and I don't know what they're talking about. And I since have learned that the vast majority do not know what that phrase even means. And so I went looking for answers. Frankly, none of the writings by any trans women who were supporting the claim, they were not helpful. They did not answer any questions. So I just started, like I said, reading and listening to everything, and found much more satisfactory answers coming from other voices, radical feminists, but then also others, not just radical feminists, male psychologists, parents who are regular everyday people like you and me. They're not part of some movement like feminism. They're not experts. They're just parents with children, with teenagers who had seen what was going on, and just a variety of those sources, just lesbians who had seen what was going on in their community. I just started to listen to all those people, and they gave so much more intellectually satisfactory explanations of what was going on as a social phenomenon.
I think
Yeah,
I
go
think
ahead.
that's a really good point. So listening to lesbians for me was a huge eye opener. Because I think I realized that, LGBT, like, as a whole, obviously they're going to have different needs depending on how that person identifies. But being a lifelong supporter of women's rights and women's health care, I wanted to see, what was going on behind the scenes, because something just felt wrong. And
Mm-hmm.
the more I listened and the more I looked into it, I was finding more and more lesbians just being bullied in
Mm,
their own spaces. And that was heartbreaking to me. Um, and I actually feel bad that I didn't try to look out sooner, because I really feel like I should have been listening to them all along. And I don't know. I think I was just unaware of how bad it had gotten. But one big, huge thing for me as well was listening to D-trans voices.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
really hard to read these women's stories, and men. It's really disturbing. And something that I noticed that came up a lot was, once when they decided to detransition, it was because they realized there's no correct feeling to being a woman. And
Mm-hmm.
that hit me really hard. I had never actually thought about that. And I was like, wow, like, what even does it feel like to be a woman that
That's funny because that was my
is
first thought. Before I researched anything, I started with that question. That never made any sense to me.
right? Like,
Yeah,
it is just your biological reality, and your whole life doesn't need to revolve around it. It just is who you are, and it's fine. I don't
yeah,
know. So that really bothered me, and I thought, what's going on with this, like, feel like a woman? Like,
yeah.
there is no right way to feel like a woman. And and I actually, um there was a lesbian on Instagram that found me, and uh she was really awesome, and she liked some of my artwork. And so I started talking to her a little bit on Instagram. And I said something to her one day, about just like, there is no right way to do this. We just are women. We don't have to shave our legs. We don't need to do our hair. None of that is being a woman. It literally is just our biology. And I was just telling her how heartbreaking it was to listen to D-trans and then talk about like, oh, there's actually no feeling to it. It just is. And she was just like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad you said that. Like, I needed to hear that. And that, I don't know, that was like a light bulb went off. Like, we need to be talking about this more because, oh my gosh, it's heartbreaking for me to think about young girls out there that think that there's more to this than there actually is. It really is, you just be you just be yourself. That's it. There's no right way to be a woman. We can all do it however we want to do it. We can dye our hair if we want to. We can not dye our hair. We can whatever. It doesn't change the fact that we're women. Like, it has nothing to do with your personality traits. It's just one part of who you are. That's it.
Yeah. One thing that really kind of clarified the thought for me early on when I was starting to ask the question and starting to realize what I already knew, that there's no such thing as feeling like a woman, is I used to kind of take different people's claims about it feels like this or that. And I used to ask myself, well, does that apply to a woman in a coma? Because a woman in a coma is still a woman. Or does that apply to a little baby, a 10-month-old baby girl who doesn't know anything about herself or gender stereotypes or feelings? That's still a baby girl. Does that apply to a 99-year-old nursing home patient who is basically in a fog because of dementia or something? She doesn't think about herself. So this idea that feeling like a woman, it's very, I think the word for this is solipsism, but I'm not 100% sure. But again, like we said, we're two regular women. We're not geniuses, so it's okay if I use a word wrong. But from what I remember from undergrad, solipsism is this idea that like you yourself are like your own little, you're like, oh, I don't know if I can explain this. Like never mind. I can't explain it. But this idea that your inner, like being aware of your inner feelings, that is required to be a woman. That means that, like I said, women in a coma aren't women. Baby girls who have no sense of self aren't baby girls. And that's just ridiculous. Like, a woman in a car accident who goes into a coma is still a woman, because it just comes down to just being a human female, and that's it. That's all there is to it. So those of you who are listening who are like already on the radical feminist or gender critical train, you're probably really bored because you're like, yeah, I know. But those of you who are new and are just finding out about this stuff, you're like maybe confused. So we are going to spend the next episode talking about definitions. We will take some time. We want to just kind of do an introductory episode, get our voices out there, kind of be like, hey, nice to meet you. This is us. We're going to be sharing sweet tea with you every week. But next week, we are going to stop and do some definitions or define some terms like gender critical, like trans women. What are people claiming when they say trans women are women? Because a lot of people think they hear trans women and they think a female who wants to present as a man. They think a woman who transitioned to live as a man. Because it's all very confusing because everything is the opposite. So a trans woman's a male who wants to present as if he is a woman. So we will do a lot of that. So brand new people just trying to figure out what's going on in the world, hang tight. Should we talk about kind of the big Southern story of the week? Should I do it?
Let's do it.
Okay, so we listeners, I really hate to do this to you guys and gals, sorry. I really hated to do this, to bring this up the very first episode. We have dinosaurs drinking tea. We wanted to have fun with it. But we promised you from the very beginning we would always tell the truth and we would tell you what's going on when no one else will. So we have to bring you a really, really shocking, frankly, just horrifying story out of Virginia this week. Now, the events happened earlier. The events happened in May and June, but they have just been brought to light this week, and they have been getting a little bit of coverage in the last couple of days. So there is a school board county in Virginia, Loudon County, I believe is how you say it, Loudon County, Virginia. And the school board meetings have been in the press a lot because they've been very contentious, and they've been contentious over a number of things. Like a lot of school board meetings in America today, they've been contentious over mask mandates or vaccine mandates or critical race theory, and all of these very polarizing issues that Americans, frankly, right now are having a really hard time just coming to the table and talking these things over. But one of the flashpoints at the school board meetings have been the gender identity policies, the policies of schools to say, for example, that students could use a bathroom that they identify with. So bathrooms not being separated by biological sex, but being that a student is free to use either bathroom that they just, according to their gender identity.
Can I just point something out? So I think one thing that I've noticed a lot of is the phrasing and the way that this is being framed in media is as if it's anti-trans to want to keep the bathrooms sex segregated. Yes. And I think that that's really misleading. Yes. Because it and as well with the sports, these
definitely with the sports
are not right. These things are not anti-trans. These things are, we have the bathrooms separated by sex to protect women and girls, and yes, also for dignity and privacy. Females go through a very, very, very specific thing that only is for females, and that's menstruation. We can't allow young girls who are going to be really uncomfortable with their first period, their second period, yes, you don't, it took me a long time to be comfortable with bleeding once a month. It's pretty scary. So, I don't know, this is not anti-trans. This is absolutely to protect everyone's privacy. It's uncomfortable, being a young girl, getting your period for the first time. And now add on to that, now you've got to also see people in your bathroom who aren't going through that, and they're not going to go through that.
And they just don't understand it. But we see time and time again in funny little online articles or funny little tweets where how little understanding men and boys have of the female body, and how they're comically stupid about it. So no boy or man is going to understand what it's like to deal with menstruation, especially teenagers, adolescents. No teenage boy is going to understand what it's like for a teenage girl to have to go in and discover she started her period in the middle of the school day, or discover she's having her first period, or to try to change a tampon, which is very stressful when you first start using tampons. It's very stressful.
Absolutely.
And I'm sorry, no boy is ever going to understand that. And girls deserve their privacy. Yes.
I think a lot about how many times I needed to go home early because I bled through my clothes. You know, things like that. Like I had very heavy periods starting out, so I was always, you know, bleeding through stuff, and it was embarrassing. Like I can't imagine not even having my bathroom to myself,
I want to
or
tell you
just around other girls.
I'm going to tell you something that I think I've never told anyone, and we're going to like put it on the broadcast, that I had a very specific strategy. What always stressed me out in the public bathrooms at school, at high school, was that like the wrappers made so much noise, right? A pad wrap, right? So here was my strategy. My strategy was to, this is so crazy. I would like build up a series of layers so that I never had to change anything. I could just discard it. So I would put like a big pad and then like a smaller pad on top, and then I would insert a tampon in the morning.
Wow.
So then I would go to school, and when it was time to change the tampon, I didn't change it. I just removed it and threw it away. And then went to a new pad, but I didn't have to like open the pad. It was already there. And then when that pad was full later in the day, I could just rip off the top pad and be left with the bot. So I was always just like, I had this whole strategy about working through these layers that I could then just throw away and never have to insert a new tampon, never have to open a package, never have to carry a package into the bathroom, never have to ask anyone for anything. So I was never changing anything. I was always just like throwing things away. And yeah, I've never told anyone that. And by now, like all the male listeners are like, ew, gross, I'm never going to this channel again, which is like, good, fine.
That's great.
But we've kind of like, we've gone off. We've talked about how at the very least, women and girls have the right of privacy, as we've been describing.
And boys do too. I mean,
Yeah,
to make
too.
it fair, I mean, when you're growing up and you're just now like getting comfortable with your body, and your body is changing every 5 minutes, it feels like you're growing hair in new places. Everything is just different for both girls and boys. It's not only just for girls. Like when you're talking about the bathrooms in schools, like I don't think it's appropriate to put boys in that position either, to have young girls in their bathrooms. That's just inappropriate. It's such a hard time to go through. Puberty is not fun. It sucks for most people. So why make it even harder and make them uncomfortable on both ends? Like that, it just doesn't make sense.
That's a good point, because I think we do often forget about the privacy and dignity of boys and men, that they have just as much right to expect privacy and to assume that they're going to be around other men who have similar issues with their bodies and understand their bodies. Yeah, I think that's fair.
Especially in schools, you know?
Yeah, like, especially with those adolescents in schools. But to get back to, even I'm having a hard time getting back to my train of thought. So obviously privacy at the very least, but the real crux of the issue is safety. And people want to continue to deny this and deny this and deny this and act like no male would ever abuse lenient policies and go in and behave as a predator toward women and girls. And we know that's absolutely not true. And very sadly, there has been a specific case brought to light this week in the South, in this school system in Loudon, Virginia, where a girl, where a school system had those use the bathroom you identify with, and a boy who and we're gonna post. I want to post two different articles down below in the comments. One from what I consider a left leaning site, and one from what I consider a right leaning site. I want you to see both. But they're both thorough, and they both agree on the details that this boy, who I never saw identified himself as a girl, he identified as bisexual, I think, and he liked wearing skirts to school. So first of all, it goes without saying, a skirt does not make you a girl. If so, like, talk to the Scottish, they wear kilts. But anyway, Even here where we don't wear kilts, a skirt is just a skirt. But he went into a girl's room with, there was another girl there in the girl's restroom, and he brutally sexually assaulted her. And that will be made clear in the articles. Yeah, so we hate that we have to report to you a case of rape in the very first week of our show, but we do. Please check out those articles. And please, 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 parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, family, friends, anybody who knows kids, find out your school district's policies. Please find out the policies for your kids' schools. Please try to take a stand against these gender neutral bathrooms because they are not safe for girls. They're just not. I don't care what anyone tries to tell you. It's not. Once you create a system where any boy can go any space for any reason, and all he has to do is say some magic words, say, I identify as something like gender fluid. But once you create that system, predators are going to take advantage of it. Mm-hmm. And in the past, if a girl had been followed into a girl's room by a boy, all she would have to do is call out, right? Just call out to the teachers, hey, what are you doing? Hey, what is this guy doing? And go get some help. You can't do that anymore. This student was not in a position to do that at this school because she would have been told that she was bullying the boy, that she was being a bigot for not letting the boy identify as a girl that day and use the girls' room. So they found a way to stop us from socially stopping men and boys from going into ladies' rooms. Like we're no longer allowed to just call out to other people and say, hey, what is this guy doing here? Get this guy out of here.
And I think that's an important point because in the beginning of this, it seemed like, I was seeing a lot of arguments. Well, if something happens to you in the bathroom as a woman, you're sexually assaulted, whatever, you can just talk to the police about it, or, whoever is in charge of that building that you happen to be in,
security, or the police,
something
or
like that. And it's like, okay, first of all, women don't tend to report rape issues as much as they happen. This is a fact. I mean, it's and not even just a little bit. I mean, women really do not report sexual assaults. Like the numbers are really bad on that. So you've got that, and also children don't tend to report sexual assault because they're not sure what's going to happen to the other person, to them. They don't want to get in trouble.
They feel ashamed. Yeah.
Right. And they don't understand maybe if it's even wrong. They may not even understand how wrong it is. And so in this particular situation, not only was the girl not allowed to really say anything, or able to get help in her situation to prevent it. They also, the articles, most of the articles that I saw were focusing on her dad getting arrested. And her dad was arrested because he lost his temper about what happened to his daughter. And I don't know of any father who would not lose his shit if it was his daughter.
Yeah, let's go back to the fact that we promised you, listeners, that we would always tell the truth. The dad lost his shit because that school board lied to him and lied to everyone in that room. That school board made the claim. Remember I told you these events happened like back in May and they just now came to light? So they happened back in May. And then this summer, that school board, when the idea was up for debate, the idea of the bathrooms, the issue of the bathrooms is up for debate. That school board told the room full of parents there that there's never been a sexual assault. We've never had problems with this. This doesn't create a problem.
Flat out denied
basically lied, told that father. I mean, can you imagine not losing your shit? if somebody looked you in the eye and said, no, your daughter wasn't raped. And then another person, not on the school board, like a parent, that's what she said. This other parent,
I don't believe her.
She told the father, your daughter is making it up. And so frankly, good on him for losing his shit and losing control, because that means, I mean, that's the depth of his passion and his love for her, how passionately he's going to work to speak up on her behalf and to speak up to protect other girls. I'm sorry, that's being a good dad. Like he should be that emotionally invested in it. If someone is going to create policies that allow your daughter to be raped and then turn around and lie to you about the results of those policies and lie to everyone else and cover up the fact that your child was raped, that should make you angry. That's a justifiable response. But of course, what the media wanted to show, and here I sound like a little bit like a crazy person, but no, just, I mean, I don't know how else to phrase it, that the media just wants to show like, oh, see, at school board meetings, parents are going crazy. And so there needs to be police and there needs to be security and the FBI needs to step in. And like, without doing any deep journalism, deep investigation into like, why did this dad lose his shit, because they just want to paint it as this story of like, oh, crackpot parents. He's not a crackpot. His daughter was raped. And I want to go back to something that you were saying earlier, how they always say like, well, if something happens, you can always call the police.
They didn't even call the police.
Oh, I wasn't even going to get to that part yet. I was going to say, the police don't have a time machine though. You can't go back and make this child not be raped. This will be with her for the rest of her life. So we have things in place to try to prevent bad things from happening, because even though, yes, they're against the law, we have this in any number of cases in life. A lot of things are against the law, but what we do is we try to prevent them, because we know that even though, yes, we can go to the police, we can go to the courts, it's better for them to have never happened to you at all, because they're absolutely life altering. And so, yeah, you can call the cops. The cops don't have a time machine. The cops aren't going to go back and save you and save your life. It's not possible. She has been damaged. This is trauma she will have to deal with probably for the rest of her life. And it happened because no one wanted to take preventative measures for safety, because it might hurt some kids' feelings. That's what it came down to. They chose feelings over safety.
And we talked a little bit not too long ago about just teenagers in general. There's a lot of hormones going on. I mean, and it's almost like a joke, like, how young teenage boys just are always wanting to jerk off. And, like, I don't know how anyone who's ever been around teenage boys could think that this is a good policy. It just does not make sense. And it doesn't make sense from the girls' perspective either, because the girls are also going to be going through a lot of new things that, they're figuring out their bodies and stuff. And what's the worst thing you can do? Well, take down the safeguarding. That's the worst thing you can do.
Yeah.
And that's what's happening is, all safeguarding is gone. And they can say all day long, well, you can always alert security or the cops, but like you said, you can't undo that sexual assault. You can't undo it. And it's not even helpful, because in this situation, the school flat out denied that it happened. And when they did call the cops, it was on the dad for being unruly.
Yeah. Yeah. So the only reason that this case is going to trial, that this boy is being held accountable, is because when it initially happened that day, the school did not want to report it as a sexual assault to the police. The dad was called to the school to come meet with them and pick up the child, because they told him there was an incident, she was assaulted. And then, like, I think he sort of like eventually got it out of them that it was a sexual assault. And they weren't going to call the police. And he took her to a hospital to get a rape kit done. He did that. So he they contacted law enforcement. The school didn't do it. The school was going to try to cover it up. The school was going to try to ignore it. And I was in an online discussion with some people this very morning about that fact. And a gentleman pointed out to me that, yeah, that happened in Georgia as well. And he sent me an article that we'll post down below in the description, that in Georgia, the Decatur County or the Decatur City school system was investigated, not so much the incident of sexual harassment, but they were investigated because they were supposed to like contact a federal investigating it, like launch a federal investigation, and they didn't. So now they're being investigated for not investigating properly. You see what I'm saying? Like they're being investigated for not like escalating the I don't know if escalating is the right word, but you know what I'm saying? They wanted to sweep it under the rug. They wanted to ignore it. They didn't want to contact any authorities. And so they're now under federal investigation just for the way they handled it. Like it's now, like, as far as I can understand, it's very difficult to even understand what happened. But this case was in an elementary school. This is an elementary school girl whose mother brought forward an accusation of sexual harassment against an elementary school boy on her daughter. So it's not just the teenagers. And I'm not like lecturing you. I'm just saying for the audience, it's not just the teenagers. It's all the way down into the elementary school where we're having these gender neutral bathrooms. And the schools aren't willing to have safeguarding, and they're not willing to have proper investigations, and they would prefer to just sweep it under the rug.
Mm-hmm. I think there was also a show or a documentary on HBO a few years back about college sexual assault and how certain colleges were basically completely fudging the numbers.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
To make it seem like, this is a safe place. And it goes on to interview various women that were, on campus and were raped or assaulted. And they were always told, don't go to the police. We will handle this internally.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because they didn't want to scare other parents away from like sending their child to this college. So this has been going on for a while, that we just kind of sweep these things under the rug.
Yeah, it's like a PR. Yeah.
Right. And so, if this stuff was already happening for years now,
mm-hmm.
how bad is it going to get if we're also just taking all the safeguarding down?
Yeah.
As far as bathrooms, and not just bathrooms. It's not just bathrooms. It's changing rooms, locker rooms. One thing that really bothers me is thinking of the changing room, like, or the shower room at the pool.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how are you going to handle that? That's, I think of like young girls, going to the pool and like having to shower before they get in the pool or whatever. And how is that going to work when there is an adult male with a penis?
Yeah.
Like, that's so inappropriate. So inappropriate. Like, I don't care how they identify. A young girl, a little girl, a teenage girl, none of these, and also women, just grown ass women, still, they don't deserve to have to like let their guard down and be okay with this. This is not something that we need to be training girls to be okay with. Absolutely not. It's just so inappropriate.
It's about as stupid as saying, it would be like if you were to say people, yes, car theft is a crime. So if your car gets stolen, you can always call the police. But when you lock your car doors, that hurts your neighbor's feelings, because you're implying that your neighbors are thieves who want to steal your car, and that's so disrespectful and that hurts their feelings. So you should leave your car doors unlocked And also we're going to make it illegal to install alarm systems, because again, that just communicates to your neighbors that you think they're thieves. That hurts their feelings. But don't worry, if anyone steals your car, that's when you should call the police.
That's a really good analogy.
Yeah, because that's what you're doing. You're taking down safeguards, things like locks, and saying we can't try to prevent any crimes. We can just wait for them to happen. And like I said, yeah, you might get justice. Let's assume the best case scenario, you get justice. The guy goes to court and is convicted. There's no time machine. You don't get to go back and not be raped. You don't get to go back and not have a public exposure. You know, indecency. Look at you can't go back and unsee the peen. So you can't go back and undo the sexual harassment. So it's just,
and who's to
it's
say
stupid.
the girl is not going to be blamed? Because that's another common thing. You know, like society does not seem to want to listen to women when they say, I've been sexually assaulted, I've been raped, I've been, you know, whatever has happened, domestic violence.
See,
the cops like to ignore the women. And what happens when they assume, and it happened recently, what happens when the cops assume that it is the woman that is provoking things? It is the girl that is provoking things. I mean, we watched it happen with Gabby Petito. There was a traffic stop, and I mean, I watched the entire video, and the cops are assuming that it was her. She was the one that was being the abusive one towards him. And guess what? She's not with us anymore. So, you know, that's another thing that I kind of have in the back of my mind is like, what happens if one of these women or one of these girls decides to speak up and say, hey, this happened to me? What happens when nobody believes her, and not only doesn't believe her, but tries to blame her and get her in trouble? Because these things absolutely happen all the time.
So this is why I think that these kind of stories, especially this Virginia story, which is just so shocking. And you would think, well, this would be like headline news in America, right? Mm-hmm. I have a theory that the reason it's not is because it doesn't conveniently fit anyone's narrative. So all the news outlets today, they have their narrative that this is the story that they're telling to Americans about how it is, about how America is now. And they want everything to fit their narrative. So if you look at the right, a big part of the narrative is that rape culture isn't real, sexual harassment isn't real, it's not a big problem. And so they're like, oh, Me Too, that's overkill, or this, all these movements from the left to draw attention to believing women who make these kind of accusations. This is overkill. This is like a witch hunt against men. That's their narrative. So are they going to put themselves in the position to just believe a teenage girl? That's a little difficult for them. More difficult, however, though, is on the left, because the left has the narrative of like Me Too and believe her, but this ruins their narrative of there's no problem with gender inclusivity. There's no conflict of rights. There's no danger. Women and girls are not going to be hurt by this. There's no threat of rape. This never happens. So
no one will take advantage of this.
Yeah, it doesn't fit their narrative. So no one wants to talk about it because it doesn't fit their nice little neat narrative. Where there's just nowhere to talk about a teenage girl who got raped in a girl's bathroom at school. And then the boy actually went on to sexually molest a different girl at a different school when he was supposedly, the family understood it to be that he was on house arrest, but somehow he was enrolled at a different school in the system and cornered a girl in a classroom and sexually assaulted her. So he's clearly a predator, and he used this loophole about wearing a skirt means you get to go in a girl's bathroom to act as a predator and to prey on this girl. And it's really upsetting. So like I said at the beginning, I hate to bring you guys, this is like our first issue that we're discussing, our first event, and it's like, it's already just horrific. So so we need to wrap it up.
All right.
On that horrible news story. Do you want to talk about a feature that we're going to start using in our next episode? We're going to start using at the end of every episode.
Yes. So we recognize that we're going to be bringing some bad news on this channel. But one thing I wanted to talk about as well is there's a lot of women out there that are speaking up and that are doing awesome things. And so I've created a Kickass Woman Award, and we're going to present that at the end of every episode and just talk about a woman that inspired us that week, or maybe even a couple of women that inspired us that week. And this was actually got the idea because of Dr. Jane Claire Jones and Aja. She released some spoken word poetry and it just blew me away. And so both of these women have just really, really, really inspired me to speak up more and start talking about these things with other women. And they've given me a lot of confidence to say things that I probably wasn't comfortable saying, a few months ago. So yeah, we're going to start to highlight other women that maybe you'll want to follow on social media, or, and it's going to be a mix of women who are artists, feminists who are speaking up in their area, and they're going to be around the globe. I recognize that both of these women are from the UK. So yeah, we just want to do something positive as well, and just maybe encourage you to go out there and support other women who are speaking up about this stuff.
You know what? How about I think you're our first Kick-Ass Woman of the Week?
Aww.
Because here we are. We've been talking about this for a couple weeks, and we sat down and we made our video, and you guys check out this sweet art. Do you like these dinosaurs having their sweet tea? You made that, and it's awesome. And I think you even came up with you came up with the name of the show and everything. And I was like, yes, that's perfect. So I raise a glass to you. I toast you with my sweet tea.
Aww.
And I think we have to wrap it up and get out of here, though. Any final thoughts? Did we cover everything?
I think we covered as much as we possibly can in this short period of time.
And either we terrifically bored people, or we left some people going, what the heck is going on? So, as LeVar Burton used to encourage us on Reading Rainbow to go to your local library and read more. Go online and read more. Start seeking out these articles. We're going to post articles in the comments, and start seeking out articles and interviews and stuff about what is going on today. All right.
And I just hope that we have encouraged some woman somewhere to, I don't know, even just talk to her best friend about these things if she hasn't spoke up already. Because we've got to start talking amongst ourselves, or this is never going to change.
Yeah, talk to your friends, go to the porch, stop by your neighbor's porch, have a glass of tea, ask her if she heard about this thing in Virginia. Has she noticed pronouns in her workplace? Has she heard about all this stuff going on with the pornography now? Oh, this is all very bleak, though. I feel like, well, good luck with that. No, but we'll talk more. We'll have other episodes. We'll talk more about things you can bring up, how I can bring them up. Just if you feel like you need to speak out, please do, ladies. Don't be afraid. Use your voice.
Yes.
All right. Are we ready to give our little send off?
I think we are.
Okay. Are we ready to are we going to do it in unison here?
Sure.
Okay.
We'll try.
Okay.
3, 2, 1.
Bye, y'all.
Bye, y'all.